So today what we're going to do is we're going to be using trig inverses to find an unknown angle. Last lesson, we knew an angle and we knew one side, and so we were using the trig functions in order to find that unknown side. Well, this time we're going to go it a little bit differently. We're going to have two sides, but we're not going to know the angle that we have. So what we're going to do is we're going to use what are called the trig inverses to find that unknown angle. And really, the inverses just comes in when you're solving the actual equation. So the easiest way to do this is just to look at one of them, and then I'm going to write the steps as we go. Okay? You're going to see it's exactly the same in the beginning as when we were looking for the sides, but this time we're going to be looking for the angle. So our x, our unknown, is going to go to a different spot. Okay? So let's just pop over to the book. Oh, sorry, I had this set up. Okay, so we're just going to look at one of these and go from there. So let's just look at number one, and I'm going to show you what the pieces that are different, that are slightly different. So again, the first thing we're going to do is we need to label our triangle. Always start there so that you know exactly what pieces you have. So here we have our angle. We have this long slanted line, so that's the hypotenuse, right? We have this line that's right up against our angle, so that's the adjacent. And remember, we have so, ka, and toa. And a and h, that can only be ka. So we're looking for the cosine, okay? So second, determine which trig function okay, then set up your equation or function. Function equation mean the same thing. So here we go. So we know it's cosine, but this time we don't know the angle. So that's where our x is going to be. So the cosine of x is equal to, and it's adjacent over hypotenuse, so 19 over 23. So there's our equation or our trig function. So that part doesn't look the same. It doesn't look any different when we're setting up the equation. It's just that our x is in a slightly different spot. Now to solve for x, what I have to do is I have to get rid of the cosine part. Okay? Now, if we were just getting rid of a number, say that was like 20x equals blah, 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 who cares? We would simply divide both sides by 20. And that would eliminate it. We could divide. Even though we could do that all day long because it's easy to divide by a number. But in this case, if I want to leave the x by itself, what I would have to do is I would have to divide both sides by the word cosine. And that doesn't make any sense. We can't do that. Now, it would make the cosine disappear on this side, but it's not going to give us, we couldn't do this math. That makes no sense at all to divide a number by a word, okay? So what we have to do is we have to figure out a way we can do that. And what we'll do is we need to use the opposite or inverse of our function, our trig function. And you can find these on your calculator. So instead of dividing by cosine, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply by something instead. Okay? So once you find the inverse of that, and I'll show you what it is, then simply multiply both sides by that inverse. Before I go any further, let me give you just a few minutes to make sure you have all of. Okay. So in order to understand how to make the trig function disappear, we need to look at what are called the inverse trig functions. And you're just going to have to find these on your calculator, but I'm sure that's usually just shift whatever. So the inverse of sine, you'll simply see sine to the negative 1. The inverse of cosine, cosine to the negative 1. The inverse of tangent, tangent to the negative 1. So what's really happening is, if that's a negative 1, that means you have some number divided by the sine, which you can't do. But if we move that to the top, remember what that would do would be to change its sign, to change the sign of the exponent, which means that it's not where it's supposed to be, but it's still usable in this case. So what we're going to do is, we're just going to multiply both sides by these inverses to eliminate the functions. Okay? So let's go back to that one and set it up and look at what we'll multiply by and how we can get rid of it. Okay? All right, I'm going to go to one that they've already worked for you because I've loaned my calculator to somebody, so I don't have one. So here we go. We'll look at this one. So we have our triangle. First thing we're going to do is we're going to label our triangle. Here's our angle, so we know the adjacent and we know the opposite. So SOHCAHTOA tells us that if we know adjacent and opposite, that's a tangent function. So we have the tangent of an unknown angle is equal to, and it's opposite over adjacent, so 13 over 10. And so that gives us our trig function. We'll just switch to paper so you can see it a little easier. Now, I can't just divide by tangent because that doesn't make it, there's no argument to the tangent, so your calculator can't do that. But what it can do is, instead of using divide by the tangent, I can multiply by its inverse. So we're going to multiply both sides by tan to the negative 1. And over here, these two things are opposites, so they're going to eliminate each other. And on this side, when you take the tangent, the inverse tangent of 13 over 10, and make sure that when you do that, you use brackets. Otherwise, it'll only take the inverse tangent of the top part. So make sure you do tangent negative 1 bracket 13 over 10. Then what's going to happen is you'll get your answer. So you get your 52.4 degrees. Okay? So it's very similar to what we've been doing, except in order to undo a tangent, you have to use the inverse trig function. And they don't even usually show solving it on both sides. So if you have tangent of some angle, and because it's an unknown angle, they use theta instead of x, it doesn't make any difference, equals 13 over 10, they'll usually just drop that off and say that it's equal to the inverse tangent of 13 over 10. So when you're looking at directions, most of the time, most books and teachers just leave that off and just say, oh, well, we know that means take the inverse instead. But if you're shaky at all with it, you can always simply just multiply both sides by the inverse tangent and those two eliminate each other, just leaving your x term. And that's what's happening, is they really did multiply both sides. They just don't show that work. Okay? So I'm going to set an assignment for you where these are all mixed together. I don't want you to do each one individually unless you just need more practice. You know if you need more practice or not. So we're just going to work with finding angles, the mixing it up. It starts on page 40 and runs through page 41. So the assignment, page 40 through 41. Okay, I'm going to put this on Teams, so I really want you to upload it and so that I can have some evidence of your working, okay? So make sure that you try to upload it on Teams. If you can't get it uploaded, then send me an email, that's fine. But again, I just need some evidence of your workings. Okay. Well, thanks, guys. See you next time.